Namaskar and welcome once again. You're watching DD India, and this is our continued coverage of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Johannesburg, where he's taking part in the G20 summit. It's a top-level meeting of the heads of the world's 20 richest countries, and much is expected to unfold over the course of the 2 days that this meeting is taking place. This is the Leaders Summit. They are meeting and they're having discussions. There's going to be a declaration related to the collective action of this group. It's going to be on every subject: global conflicts, trade, finance, technology, climate, and much more. But this is also the first G20 summit in Africa and the fourth to be hosted by a global South nation in succession. So the focus can be expected to continue to be priorities that India had put forward in 2023 under its presidency. My name is Mark Lynn. This is the G20 South Africa. Solidarity, equality, and sustainability is the theme. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived on Saturday at the G20 venue in Johannesburg to attend the G20 Leaders Summit in South Africa. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will present India's perspective, which is going to be in line with India's vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the world is one family and one earth, one family and one future. Well, South Africa has carried forward the outcomes from the previous G20 summits held in New Delhi and Rio de Janeiro. The theme for this summit is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. And it is the first G20 summit being held in Africa. And during India's presidency, if we recall, in 2023, the G20 summit in New Delhi, the African Union had become a member of the G20. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, the current chair of the G20, at the initial meeting. Several world leaders have arrived for the G20 summit in South Africa. This is Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving a little earlier in the day. And we are joined by Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, former senior diplomat. He'll help us put this G20 summit into context and also the voice of the Global South. Ambassador Sajanhar, you know, India in its 2023 presidency had left a pretty strong legacy. We see that has been taken forward by Brazil and now by South Africa. To what extent do you see, you know, the 2025 agenda being influenced by India's presidency of 2023?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for having me on your show. You're very right. You know, it really started, of course, you know, as you mentioned yourself, that it is the fourth time that a developing country is chairing the G20 summits. It started with Indonesia. But you left out Indonesia in this four, and I think it was rightly so, because, you know, that was the time, if you remember, that was the time when the world was really battling with the whole issue of Ukraine-Russia conflict. And it was, you know, the whole time during Indonesia's presidency, it was spent as to how we'd be able to come to a consensus leaders declaration. Right. And then it was Prime Minister Modi's formulation, which he had given to President Putin in September of 2022, just a few months after the war had started in Samarkand on the sidelines of the SCO summit, that this is not an era of war. By using that formulation, we were able to get over the hump in Indonesia. So the real work on, making an imprint of the global south, so that really fell to India. And you would remember that within 10 days or 12 days of India taking over the mantle as the chair of the G20, we had the first Voice of the Global South Summit on 12th and 13th January, in which more than 125 heads of state, government, vice presidents, etc., participated in the virtual summit.
Yes.
And after that, there were so many, what you have mentioned in terms of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that is the motto of our G20 presidency, One Earth, One Family, One Future, that was inspired by Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So after that, we had all these issues, putting the areas of concern and interest, aspirations, ambitions of the developing world onto the map of the G20. And that has been taken forward, whether it is women-led development, whether it is in terms of achieving the sustainability development goals. The
Right.
final end line for that is coming in 2030 in terms of dealing with the debt burden, in terms
Yes.
of dealing with the climate change aspects, which is really become increasingly an existential threat as far as the global community is concerned. So all these aspects, the reform of the multilateral development banks and making finance available to developing countries, all these are issues that are front and center as far as the G20 summit in Johannesburg is concerned. If you permit, I'll just make two more comments.
Sure. Go ahead,
Number
sir.
one, as you very rightly said, Mark, that AU became the 21st member of the G20 in during India's presidency in 2023. So it is good that the first time that this summit is being held on the soil of Africa, it is in South Africa, and also completes one full circle of all, holding the summits in all the 20 countries. So
Indeed.
now the next cycle is going to start with the United States. Unfortunately, the presence of the United States in Johannesburg is very glaring, because there is the president is not participating. In fact, the United States itself, its seat will be empty. Its seat is empty at this summit. So we'll really have to
Yes,
wait and
indeed.
see and
We'll,
discuss
we'll
as to how that is going to shape
True.
up.
We will talk about that. But coming to the African Union, you did mention that, they became a member during India's presidency in 2023, and now they are a full permanent member of the G20. To what extent, I mean, what kind of tangible benefits is the African Union being part of G20? What does it give to the Global South?
A couple of things we have to keep it in mind, because we have to see the rationale for India organizing the Voice of the Global South Summit. And, it was not only in January. After we had our summit in India on the 9th and 10th of September of that year, Prime Minister Modi organized another Voice of the Global South Summit, basically to report to all these 125 leaders who had participated in the virtual summit in January, to tell them as to how their anxieties, concerns on the issues that I mentioned, the debt, the climate change, the women-led development, SDGs, achieving the SDGs, what progress had been made, and how their issues of concern to them had been taken on board by the G20 countries. Mark, I think we need to recognize, the rationale that India went for expanding the mandate of the G20 to cover all the global South countries was that G20 is a gathering of about 20 odd countries. Of course, European Union also is a member, and it has 27 countries there. But it is largest 20 countries, which represent 85% of the GDP, 75% of the trade, two-thirds of the global population. But
Right.
still, there are about 160, 170 countries which are outside the ambit of the G20. And to be really effective, and the impact of all the decisions that are taken by the G20 is really felt by those countries which are outside that tent, outside that umbrella. So their causes, their concerns, their anxieties, and their aspirations also have to be taken on board. So in that context, all the decisions that were taken, it was communicated to the developing countries in November when we had the second Voice of the Global South Summit. And then
Yes.
last year again, India had organized another Voice of the Global South Summit. Now coming to the 54 countries of Africa, they did not have a voice earlier as far as the G20 is concerned. It was only South Africa. One out of these, you know, 54 countries of Africa. Now, all of them through the African Union, they are able to have a voice. And of course, there are issues of development, of growth, of terror, dealing with terror, because we have seen how in very many countries, this is also a scourge that afflicts many of the developing countries in South Africa. How can they, they account for about 18% of the global population,
Yes.
but Africa accounts for just about 3.5% of the global GDP. So Africa has been getting a short end of the stick all through.
Yes.
And the first time that we are having this summit in Africa, I think we need to make sure, and India will definitely make sure that Africa gets a great deal. It is not only pro forma that the meeting takes place here,
Right.
but that there are advantages that accrue to Africa as a result of the decisions taken by the G20 countries.
Ambassador Sajanhar, you did mention in your first answer about Indonesia's presidency and how, at the time, the war in Ukraine was causing, that G20 summit to be focused, to lose focus in a sense. Now, again, the war continues, and there is a peace plan that's been put forward by the US. When we look at India's strategic partnerships with with the US, with EU, with Russia, all members of the G20. How do you think it's going to impact, let's say, discussions on the war in Ukraine?
Yeah, so, one is in terms, if you permit, I'll say, India's voice in all these fora is very, very important. It is increasingly heard with greater respect, greater attention, and greater value is given to it. Now, for the fact that a large number of other world leaders, Donald Trump, as I mentioned right at the beginning, is not attending. We have Xi Jinping, who is not coming. He sent his prime minister. Of course, Donald Trump, the seat of America will be vacant. We don't have Mr. Putin coming. He has not been participating in any of these major international meetings, summits for the last 2-3 years, ever since the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. So in that context, the voice of India and the voice of Prime Minister Modi, because he is really the longest serving world leader who's going to be present there, and his voice will carry much greater weight. As far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, in terms of the chances of that being settled, we do see that there is a 28-point plan that has been given by America to Ukraine. My own personal view in this, Mark, is that it really takes on board all the demands and all what Russia has been asking. It gives
Right.
all the territory to Russia, and in
Ambassador
terms
Sajanhar,
of
I'll stop you for a moment because we are getting live visuals in from Johannesburg, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in conversation with the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on the sidelines of the summit. So there again, we were talking a little bit about the conflict in Ukraine and the EU actually, what role they have. Ambassador Sajanhar, you can continue. Well, we have cut visuals here to show you Prime Minister's meetings on the sidelines of the G20 summit. We know that the Prime Minister is participating in the G20 summit, and today the focus is on themes related to debt and also climate, and the Prime Minister will be participating in those. We just showed you some visuals of Prime Minister meeting with the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. They share a good relationship, and Ambassador Sajjanhar, who was with us, is back with us, and he was telling us a little bit about the voice that India presents at the G20. And when we are talking about the issues that the global issues that are prevalent at the current time, a solution to the war in Ukraine may be still part of the agenda. Ambassador Sajjanhar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so, basically, I think we also need to keep in mind, Mark, and your viewers would appreciate that, the G20 was set up in response to an economic crisis that hit the world. 2007, 2008, the subprime mortgage lending crisis that took place. There were sort of so many banks in the United States, in Europe, in Japan, which crashed. And to have a comprehensive view of the global economy and how to deal with it, the G20 came up. G7 was really expanded, although G7 continues to be there, but G7 at the economic level. So political issues, strategic issues are not really strictly a part of G20, but since Indonesia, they have become increasingly a part of this. So I think on the sidelines, Mark, there are going to be discussions, particularly because there is this whole issue of the 28-point plan that is being presented by the United States to Ukraine. So on the sidelines, there are going to be discussions, and India will have an important voice in that context, because India is one of the very few countries, if at all, if there are any others, which acts as a bridge between the north and the south and the east and the west. That is between Russia and Ukraine and the United States and Europe. It is a bridge. Prime Minister Modi has visited Mr. Putin in Moscow. He's visited Zelensky also in Kiev. And in fact, he was the first leader who just after the war had said that no disputes can be resolved as a result of wars in conflicts, but you have to come to the negotiating table to settle it. And this is what now people are saying increasingly. So in the discussions, India will have an important role to play. India has made it very clear, Mark, that we are not in it to be mediators in this process, but that we will help wherever we can. And India has contributed. It's made available its good offices to be able to bring the two countries together or deal with some of the challenges, like when it occurred with respect to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, or it occurred with respect to the export of wheat and fertilizers through Black Sea. So India's good offices are always available, and I'm sure this will be on the sidelines of the G20 summit.
Yes,
this
indeed.
will be an important issue of this time.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, you were talking about how the G20 came into existence because of the subprime crisis, and really, I mean, the main focus is about economic development, and to see that something like that doesn't happen again. And one of the key issues of the finance track has been to deal with the issue of debt distress, which is one of the serious concerns of countries of the global south. To what extent do you think this particular summit is going to focus on these issues, and again, coming back to India's presidency, where a number of things that India did show, like India's digital public infrastructure, financial inclusion, women's empowerment, all these issues as solutions in that direction?
So I think these are all issues that are very much on the agenda, Mark. And in fact, the first item of discussion on the agenda is about dealing with the debt burden. And this is something that the Prime Minister is going to address. In fact, after our presidency in 2023, we had made the DPI, the digital public infrastructure, available to the whole world as as a common good that would be made available. While you would see that most of the other countries tend to monetize whatever they are offering to the world. As far as India is concerned, it is offering it as a common good, whoever is interested. And we have found that it's been absolutely remarkable in improving the ease of business, reducing the corruption, increasing the speed of transactions. So I think it will be a big help to different countries. Many countries have already adopted it also. So I think whether it is this or in terms of how the multilateral development banks, how they can work together in terms of providing better, easy loans and assistance on easy terms. So there are many of these things, trade facilitation. I think those are all the issues that are going to be discussed. And they are, of course, going to be very helpful as far as developing countries are concerned. But as I said right at the beginning, Mark, it will also really depend upon as to how the decisions taken in Johannesburg, which are building on decisions taken in New Delhi and Rio de Janeiro,
Right.
how they are going to be taken forward by the next presidency, which is going to be the United States, which is not present at Johannesburg.
Now that this is happening in South Africa, which is, of course, part of Africa, and we looked at the greater relationship that India has with the African continent, to what extent does this give an opportunity, the fact that this is happening in South Africa, for India to improve trade ties and investment opportunities with the entire African continent? We did speak of the African Union being part of G20. I mean, at the end of the day, really you were speaking also about the potential for Africa because even though it is, I mean, it is the continent really that it's a continent of opportunity, is the way the world looks at it.
No, absolutely. I think it's the way the world looks at it is the way that India looks at it. And you would remember that, we've had this Africa Forum summits. There are three of them that have been held already. The last one having been in 2015. At that time, we had decided that we are going to hold these summits by inviting all the 54 members at the head of state, head of government level. And it will be every 5 years. Unfortunately, that fifth year, it fell during the year of COVID. And for some reason or the other, not entirely of our doing, but because the Africans themselves have also not been able to take decisions as to how to take it forward. I think the next, that is what I hear from from authoritative sources in the government, that the next Africa Forum Summit will take place next year in 2026. I think that will give a great impetus. Now, there are different ways of engaging all these 54 countries. One is marked at the level of the African Union. So, in terms of the policy dialogue that we can conduct with them as to what are the ways in which India can help. I think one of the biggest ways is in terms of human resource development, in terms of capacity development. This is something that India has been doing for a long time, but I think in terms of the sectors, in terms of the areas, whether it is fintech or it is space or it is trade, it is the blue economy, it is IT services. I think in all these, it is very essential that we take this forward. And so that is at the policy level at the AU. Then in terms of regional level, we are engaged with many of these countries. And when there are projects which go beyond, one country, there are regional projects, whether it is railway lines or other infrastructure projects. We do it at the regional level. And of course, at the bilateral level, I would say that, I think about 7, 8 years ago, India had decided that we are going to put our embassies, because there were few embassies in Africa. There were very many what are called concurrent accreditations. That is, one country looking after interests of India in many neighboring countries. So that we would put in 18 new embassies in new countries. I'm told about 14 of them have already been established. So I think this speaks of the keenness and the interest. And the last point possibly I could make here also is that the number of visits that has taken place from India, whether at the level of the president, the vice president, the prime minister, the external affairs minister, and other ministers, that has increased. So India is literally walking the talk. It is focusing on expanding its cooperation and collaboration with these countries, and
Right.
there is increasing confidence that these countries also have in India. India's presence has been there for a long, long time. Indian diaspora has been there for a long, long time. So I think
Right.
that is mutually beneficial and advantageous to both India and Africa.
Indeed, Ambassador Sajjanar, another summit that's having some trouble at the current time is in Brazil, the COP30 Belém summit, where they are not able to find a solution. And the issue is really of fossil fuels being phased out. So to what extent do you think that's going to resonate here as well? Because, I mean, climate is an issue, is one of the topics of discussion in this agenda. And, I mean, there is, after all, a lot of the countries of the global south feel that they've been shortchanged. And there is the issue also of climate finance. And then there is the balancing act that the global south has to do. Because at the end of the day, development is necessary. And a certain amount of carbon footprint is a part of that development process.
No, absolutely. You're very right, Mark, when you say this, that, whatever is happening in is going to have a very direct impact. And, both of these summits are taking place at the same time. They are sort of coterminous with each other. And these are the two big issues that are going to dominate. They have dominated the deliberations in Belém, and they are the subjects that will dominate the discussions also in Johannesburg. That is both in terms of phasing out of fossil fuel, because we know that there should be a phasing out, but then, countries like India, many other countries of the global south, they need coal, they need fossil fuels to continue on their journey of economic development and economic growth. And if we have to sort of engage both in the mitigation, particularly, then we need more finance. We need more technology, which is there with the developed countries, at appropriate technology, at appropriate terms and conditions. So I think these are all issues that, even in Belém, the meeting has been extended because there have been such polarization and such division between the countries on these issues. I'm sure here also, but the more we talk, I'm sure the more the developing countries will be able to put forward their point of view and ensure that the final results that emanate, they are increasingly more attuned to their interests and to their needs.
Uh, if we look at the U.S. taking over the presidency of the G20, and reports suggest that they didn't really participate in the troika at all during this year. So, to what extent is this going to be entirely new? I mean, is the four presidencies of the global south going to be completely left out of the picture now that the world's richest country is taking over the G20 presidency?
Yeah, it raises first, you raised two questions, very important questions. Number one, what happens to the agenda that has evolved over the last 4 years, particularly over the last 2, 3 years, in which the interests and the aspirations of the global south has been front and center in this. So what if a developed country takes over? But I think if that was the only problem, Mark, the world has also realized, the G7 countries and developed world, the North has also realized that you cannot proceed further, you cannot develop further without taking cognizance of the interests of the global South. So that, in my view, and there is a solidarity that has come up as far as the global South countries are concerned. So they would ensure that their interests are not sidelined. The second question is that the United States is not participating. And that really, Mark, puts a huge question mark. It brings the commitment of the United States to the agenda that has been developed. It makes it very suspect. It makes it that it is not to say fully committed, but it has no interest in taking it forward. You would recall that when Mr. Trump told the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa that the United States is not going to participate, he said he does not agree with the motto, with the theme of the Johannesburg conference, which is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Sustainability, we are aware that Mr. Trump and his administration, they are climate denial. They think that there is no such thing as climate change, while the rest of the world thinks that it is an existential challenge. So the fact that whatever might be the declaration, because Mr. Trump has also threatened that the declaration should not be adopted in the absence of the United States. But South Africa has made it very clear that 19 other members, or now 20 other members, because African Union is also there, all of them are going to be present. So the declaration will be adopted there. But once the declaration is adopted and once it goes to the United States for taking this forward, I am not very certain, Mark, as to how they will respond to it. And, if there is also this question mark about how the baton will be handed over, how the gavel will be handed over from South Africa to the United States. Because not Mr. Trump, not Mr. Vance, no one from the United States is participating in this summit. So unless the United States accepts and adopts this the responsibility of the 21st G20 summit next year, we will not know who's going to be the next chair of the G20, and what will be the composition of the Troika. So I think there are many question marks at the moment because of the non-participation of the United States, not only because the baton is going to a developed country, but more so that that developed country is not interested in participating in these delegations.
Indeed, and I mean, one was looking at the G20 as a possible forum that could, push for change in institutions of multilateral governance like the United Nations. But we see that, with countries like the US boycotting, in a sense, this summit, would you see, this issue being kicked down the road? And to what extent can, the G20 continue to influence that kind of change? After all, India has been calling for reform for the longest time.
No, absolutely. I think what India has also maintained is that, the time of the P5 was 1945, when the world was very, very different. At that time, the world had 53 members. That is how the United Nations was established. Today, the membership of the United Nations is 193. So more than, about 4 times that number. They are today members. And also in terms of the power structures, there might have been 5, major powers after the end of the Second World War. But today, the power of many of those countries has come down very significantly, and there are other power centers that have emerged. So it is definitely necessary for the world to take cognizance of this change that has taken place. expand the membership, expand the permanent membership of the UN Security Council. Also, the fact that the main responsibility of the UNSC, that is to maintain peace, stability, and security in the world, it is not able to do this again because the structure of the UNSC today is not reflective of the structure of what it should be, but it is reflective of the structure as it existed in 1945.
Right.
So the structure of the UNSC needs to be changed and move towards a G20 where all countries are equal. No country has a veto power. That would be the right format to take the world towards a greater harmony, greater peace, stability, and development and growth. So some innovative ideas on the same
Right.
lines as the G20, possibly the P5 needs to evolve, get better. India has given ideas along with Germany, Japan, and Brazil for the expansion of the UN Security Council. And we'll really need to wait and see. But I think the efforts need to increase because the multilateral system as embodied in the UN, particularly the UNSC, is becoming increasingly dysfunctional.
And talking about multilateral institutions, there's also the Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank that may be needing reform. And with the current presidency of the United States, with Donald Trump's tariff policies, the WTO seems to be, finding it difficult to adjust to world trade. So in this context, I mean, we are living in a world of disruption currently, and multilateral institutions, probably this is the right time for them to look inward and see whether they need reform.
No, absolutely. I think definitely as far as the WTO is concerned, you spoke at length on that. That has, even from Donald Trump's first presidency, because, one of the biggest, most significant decisions that was taken when the WTO was established on 1st January 1995 was the establishment of an appellate body, because the earlier version of the WTO, which is the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, could not function effectively because the dispute settlement system would not be functional. And one of the biggest achievements of establishment of the WTO was to get the appellate body established. And Mr. Trump, when he was in his first term, he made sure that the appellate body became totally dysfunctional and unworkable because America refused to appoint the members of the appellate body. And now, of course, in his second term, the manner in which he has been imposing tariffs on different countries totally illegally, I think that has completely wrecked the WTO, and it needs very serious reforms, which definitely it needs all the countries need to come together. Of course, as far as the IMF and the World Bank, we made several very important suggestions as far as the World Bank is concerned. And we have Mr. Ajay Banga, who has taken over as the president of the World Bank. And he was also here in 2023 at the G20 summit in New Delhi. And he was fully on board in terms of providing greater facilities, greater support, greater funding, financing at acceptable or on acceptable terms to the developing world. So I think there is some recognition in some quarters that large number of quarters, I would say, that these agencies, these institutions of multilateral development, growth, etc., they also need to move with the times. And particularly, when we are talking about trade, when we are talking about finance, it is not the same. There is, the advent of critical technologies, emerging technologies, AI. There is so much that is happening And I think it is definitely the world needs to make sure that it also moves up with the time and deals with all the new challenges that confront.
Indeed, and you did talk about AI and technology, and that, of course, is a key area of focus that the world is looking at. Uh, uh, Also, at the current time, in the security environment, use of technology also, the fact that terrorism has raised its ugly head once again, and the world needs to take that into consideration. India, of course, has constantly raised this issue at public forums and would most likely raise it again at the G20. The idea of using technology to try and restrict or to be able to gauge where terrorists exist, and that sharing of the network. To what extent can this be discussed at a forum like the G20?
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be discussed. You would recall that, in the leaders' declaration, the New Delhi leaders' declaration, terrorism and dealing with terrorism finds a very important mention, finds a very expanded, elaborate mention there. Now, I think when we are talking about technology, we have to recognize that it is a double-edged sword. Number one, as you said very correctly, Mark, that it can be used in terms of tracking, in terms of facial recognition, and ensuring that we don't have, movement of radicals, extremists, that can be tracked and intelligence exchange can take place. The second aspect, of course, is that we have the technology, AI, in terms of fake news, in terms of social media that is used to radicalize individuals. And particularly, we see that as far as Africa is concerned, that is inflicted. You look at country after country, whether it is South Africa, whether it is its neighbors, or in fact, the biggest country in South Africa, in Africa, that is Nigeria. That has been afflicted by Boko Haram. There are so many local cells of Al Qaeda, of the Islamic State, that have been operating in different countries. So the point I'm making is that Africa is the right place because there are, terrorism is not an issue that is limited only to one country, but it is to many, all parts of the world. There are threats of terrorism, but Africa is particularly vulnerable to that, and Africa has been impacted very hugely by such terrorist acts. And so I think this is the right place where detailed conversations, detailed dialogue needs to take place on, what are the causes of terrorism, how to deal with terrorism, and how to use the technology to the fullest extent to deal with it. And I think India has a huge role to play because India has been able to deal with this scourge for many, many, not only years and decades. And it has been bringing it to the notice of the world that there should be zero tolerance to terror, and that there can be no cause for justification of terror and all types of manifestation of terror. The world has to act together. There cannot be any differentiation between good terrorists and bad terrorists, and my terrorist is a freedom fighter and not the other way around, where we have seen the hypocritical attitude of very many countries acting in this regard.
Uh, Ambassador Sajanhar, when we look at the impact that this summit is going to have, we see that there seems to be, of course, the change from the global south to the global north. But apart from that, the value of the declaration, what sort of binding force does it have on, or commitments does it have on the countries that are participating?
Yeah, so, if you permit, I will also, refer briefly to, you said, movement from global south to the global north, because
Yes.
I think we need to recognize also that the heft of the global south in the global economic architecture that is increasing. You know, there was a time when G7 was established in the 1970s. Then its GDP accounted for about 60 to 70% of the global GDP. Today, the contribution of G7 is much less. It is in the range of 30% or so. That means there are large number of other countries. Maybe they are not purely global south. They are also, what are called emerging economies, etc., which are not members of the global of the north of the G7. But their heft and their contribution to the global economy has been increasing. So that is definitely one issue. And as far as the interests of the global south are concerned, they are now, as I said, even the global north has also recognized that you cannot do without the global south, because if the GDP there is high, if the markets there are high, as far as India is concerned, in terms of talent that is there is high, in terms of the raw materials. Today we are talking also about critical minerals. Most of them are in the countries of the global south, whether it is South America, it's Argentina, it's Chile, it's Brazil, etc., etc. So I think you can't really look now at the global economy in such binary terms as global north and global south. The
Indeed.
global south has increased manyfold over the last many years, and its influence and its importance has grown not in the same measure, but I think slowly it is increasing, and it will continue to do so. And as these deliberations have shown, irrespective, now even we see that whenever the G7 summits are held, they always invite the chair of the G20. And, we've seen whether it was India, of course, has made its presence in all G7 meetings for the last 6, 7 years. India has been
Right.
invited regularly. But the G7, the North has also recognized and realized the importance and growing, evolving significance of the global South in the global economy.
Indeed, and when we look at India once again, Ambassador Sajanar, I'm sorry for keeping you this long, but India has examples to show, and that is what when we talked about the DPI, we talked about women empowerment. These are examples that India is willing to share with the rest of the global South and has been doing so. To what extent has it helped, build trust? And to make the global south really, you said that there's no longer binaries, but the point is that to make the global south carry some heft, even in the technology realm, in the financial realm, in the inclusion realm, all these aspects, the global south has examples to show now of progress.
No, absolutely. And please don't apologize for keeping me. I'm enjoying the conversation, really.
Right.
So, coming to, I think India enjoys a great deal of trust. India has always reached out, South-South cooperation has always been our motto. That is what we have worked on. That is what we've acted on. What makes India different today, Mark, is that India's capacity has grown. India's GDP today, we are the fourth largest in the world. It is more than $4 trillion. Our capacity to help other countries has grown increasingly, and we have used it not for our own advantage, but for the benefit of the other countries. For instance, there are umpteen number of examples. When COVID struck, there were developed countries which really sat on their COVID vaccines, and they would not share them. There are highly advanced developed countries which are sitting on, which had inventories of 4 to 8 times their population, and their date of expiry came up. They were not able to use them, but they did not share them with the developing countries. Unlike India, India under its vaccine Maitri initiative we started our vaccination drive, if I remember correctly, on the 16th of January 2020 and 2021, sorry, 16th January 2021. And we started supplying under the vaccine Maitri all gratis Covishield vaccines on the 21st of January. So whether it is Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and many of the neighboring countries, we started supplying vaccines at that time. Overall, we gave away more than 300 million vaccines to more than 100 countries. And medical supplies in terms of hydrochloroquine, paracetamol, etc., to more than 150 countries. So I think this level of trust, the trust quotient that countries have in India is huge, that India will not be engaging with them only for its own, not for its own benefit, not for its own advantage, but for the advantage of the developing countries. So I think in that sense, whether it is the sort of projects that we are conducting with countries in Africa in terms of the education, in terms of sending our teachers, in terms of developing projects, I think that is the level of trust is much greater. And the fact that we tend to help the countries through a process of negotiation and deliberation rather than trying to impose something on other countries. So that trust level is greater,
Right.
the capacity of India to deliver is greater, whether it is in space, whether it is in DPI, whether it is in pharmaceuticals and education, human resource development. I think there is a whole plethora of areas where we can really work with developing countries and meet their demands at once. Maybe last point I could mention here also, after the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there was a shortage of food grains the world over. And India at that time had put certain restrictions on export of food grains from India. But then at the request of countries like Egypt, Libya, Iraq, we opened our,
Right.
we did away with those
Absolutely.
restrictions and supplied these food grains to them.
Uh, you're watching special coverage on the G20 summit. We are putting it into context with conversation with Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar. He's giving us insights into the G20 and India's role in it.